Peter Koo, Vice President and Chief Industry Strategist for Informatica, is going to moderate a little presentation and a panel discussion on data management impacts for hybrid cloud. Peter, take it over.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name again is Peter Koo from Informatica, live here from San Francisco, California. We're obviously around the world here today. I heard London, Australia, John and Mike there in New York and the East Coast. So first of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, John and Mike and the rest of the EDM Council, for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this event, but also to continue our partnership with the Council for over a decade now. Today, I'm really excited that I'll be talking about a number of issues I think that were brought up in the previous session with regard to the impact around data management from what we call hybrid cloud. And when we say hybrid, we know that at the end of the day, organizations across the world have been making investments in cloud technology. And John, if you could give me controls, there you are. Okay, all right, a little bit of a delay. All right, so I'm gonna get used to the latency here. So if I go back real quick, John. All right, so here we go. So we talked about modernizing the business, but really when you peel the onion for a moment, we're talking about modernizing business applications, analytic solutions. We talked about those pesky legacy data warehouses, which many of them were built across the world using Informatica technology over the several decades that we've been in business. But it's also around modernizing business compute infrastructure, and all the investments that we see around the world are in the cloud. They're cloud native, they're cloud first because of the reasons why many of us invest in new technology. That's where the innovation is coming from. The benefits around cloud computing are many, and I think everyone who has been involved in these investments as part of your organizations or your clients' organizations understand it's not just about adopting the coolest technology, but it's also about being more agile, having a more flexible pricing consumption model. Cloud does, however, come in different models. We know that there's the public cloud providers that we all hear about, the private cloud infrastructure providers as well, from the organizations that are making those investments. We have hybrid, which again is a mix of on-prem as well as, again, with the cloud options that exist, and then community cloud. Each and every one of these models are adopted across pretty much every industry. And in fact, many organizations have to deal with multiple cloud environments to deal with. In fact, I remember talking to a large insurance company once and asked them, are you investing in cloud? And the response was no. And I started asking some follow-up questions. Are you using Salesforce.com or Workday for your HR system? And the answers are, oh, yes, we have all those other applications, but we're not doing anything on AWS or Microsoft, et cetera. But those answers are obviously changing these days. A lot of technology, as it moves to the cloud, drives a number of questions that organizations need to ask and will be getting questions from their business users. Is the data that they need in the systems and applications where it needs to be? Just because you have that cloud data lake on the hyperscaler or that you bought the latest and greatest software as a service solution, there's no guarantee that the data shows up magically and will always be there when you need it. Can you explain where all that data comes from? If we thought that tracking data lineage was hard to do when those systems and applications were within the firewalls of our companies, it doesn't get any easier when you adopt cloud solutions, whether in the public, private, or in the public domain. Can you trust it? Now, there's no guarantee either that traditional methods and even traditional tools to manage data quality work in this hybrid environment. Are we using the data in the right way to support our business needs? We talk about data controls, we talk about data governance and the policies, the standards, and the processes, which many of the institutions in the financial services sector developed over the years with their investments around data governance. How do you know that the data is actually being used in the right way? And of course, Security has always been a concern when it comes to cloud. But really the question is our data protected? And are we compliant with the local, national, and international data privacy laws that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis? Now, as I have heard organizations making these investments into the stratosphere, let's see if there's a way to get the slide to advance here, John. Bear with me. There we go. All right. So cloud adoption does bring new data management challenges because that data is not always available or accessible. There was a gentleman earlier who asked about data access and accessibility, IoT devices. You've got data on the peripheral. You have data that's coming from devices. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't get the data into the systems and applications, regardless of where they reside. Invalid and corrupt data. As I mentioned, data quality management was hard to do in the past. It's even harder these days, especially when you're relying on human beings to solve the data quality issues that your organizations deal with. Too many versions of X. There was a question about how do you ensure that you have a trusted golden record of a particular entity or a reference data set. This question and challenge becomes even more complicated when you have business organizations that are adopting business applications without necessarily identifying or dealing with the management and the coordination of shared business master data, reference data, such as customers, country codes, currency codes, etc. Lack of documentation. People come and go. Many of these systems that were put in place, those individuals are no longer there. Lack of documentation means every time there's a change that has to happen or a new system gets implemented, people have to understand what does the lay of the land look like today in order for them to really feel confident about the change management requirements going forward. Data being misused and abused, as well as being unprotected. These are some of the challenges that we here at Informatica have seen over the years. And one of the things that is great about this market is that we continue to innovate with the technology trends out there in the cloud stratosphere. Informatica has been around for over 27 years. We started the journey helping many of our clients, many of you who have become familiar with Informatica for our traditional on-premise perpetual license-based software solutions. We have also transformed here at Informatica. What we are now doing is providing the first ever complete intelligent data management cloud platform that handles all of the data integration challenges from the past, but also the ones we're dealing with today because of these cloud investments, but also in the future. We're not just known for data integration. We're also known for API and application integration. Data quality management, not just cleansing data, but actually leveraging AI and ML technologies to identify the patterns of errors and actually recommending what data quality rules should be applied in order to address them. Master data management, both in terms of legal entity information, reference data, product data, being able to have a central golden record that is shared across analytical and operational systems, and then being able to deliver a customer data platform that allows you to intelligently look at relationships and actually infer those relationships of your customers and prospects with other entities, including non-human entities, as well as your employees. Catalogs of catalogs. And of course, data governance and privacy. We've invested in the last 6 years in modernizing our data governance solutions to ensure that we can help democratize data across the entire organization. Informatica solutions are built upon Claire, which is our AI and ML engine that leverages these technologies in order to not just assist the human worker to do the required tasks, but actually help automate and infer and recommend what changes need to be made. And we continue to invest in ensuring that we can connect to the cloud ecosystem vendors, private and public, and ensure that we are also able to connect to the systems and applications that traditionally remain and have been around for many, many years. Now, we're also a very proud member of the EDM Council's Cloud Data Management Capabilities Work Group. Our platform as I've been participating in the CDMC meetings on a weekly basis over the last, I'd say 14 months now, we have learned that our capabilities map directly to the CDMC key controls and automation, and we will be publishing more information on how we actually support the details of the CDMC framework within the next quarter or two. With that said, I would like to introduce my guest panelists. Let's start with Anand Ramamurthy. Anand is our segment leader for data governance in our APJ region. Anand, are you there?
I am, Peter.
All right. We also have Colin Gibson. Colin is the CDMC product management lead from the EDM Council. There you are, Colin. Good evening, good afternoon.
Peter, how are you doing?
And last but not least, I want to introduce Craig Cullum. Craig is our colleague from Microsoft. He is the global data and AI specialist from Microsoft. Craig, are you there?
Hi, Peter. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you again for taking the time and joining us here today. And for the folks here listening to us and hearing our voices, similar to the previous session, please go ahead and submit your questions online. We will get to as many as we can. And if we can't get through all of them, we'll make sure that we copy and respond and share our responses back to you. So, gentlemen, we talked a lot about cloud. We talked a lot about data management, data governance challenges out there. But we've also learned that there are old ways of doing things that we're required to do today. And many organizations have yet to really transform their data management, data governance maturities and capabilities. So the first question I want to pose out there, what are companies doing to ensure they can adequately manage and govern data in today's cloud hybrid world? So I'm going to throw that question. Craig, why don't you start from the Microsoft end?
Thanks, Peter. It's been quite interesting for me in my conversations with customers and others in the industry. I think maybe 5 years ago, we talked about the 3 V's, right? We cared about velocity, we cared about volume. Now they're coming to me really sort of starting the question around security and governance and policies and how do I ensure that this is secure when I roll it out globally? And that's a real core indicator that this conversation is maturing. And we're seeing this as organizations, as was said earlier, are adopting the cloud more and more, but also as organizations are adopting the cloud, the kind of concept of authentication of identity is also changing with it, whether that's looking to integrate many other SaaS solutions into a single identity platform, and also moving away from quite simply putting a username and password on a database to something that's more role-based and more aligned to a specific person and identity. So it's actually been very interesting for me that they're starting with that question and that conversation, which is fantastic. And they're asking, hey, these tools that I pick, how can I ensure that I can govern and manage this data securely?
Colin, how about you? What are you guys seeing from the EDM Council? What are companies doing to ensure they can adequately manage and govern data?
So basically, as you said in the introduction, Peter, the problems of data management don't go away just because you adopt new technology, and the cloud being one of those new technologies. And what we're seeing is that companies have spent years and spent millions of dollars developing controls and maturing controls in their on-premises environment. They want to be sure that they have those same controls when they migrate to the cloud. And they want to have those controls working between cloud and on-premises in the hybrid environments. And that really was the genesis behind the CDMC initiative. Companies wanting to be have best practice that they've spent years maturing and have that best practice working in the cloud. If you take one of the foundations basically of within the CDMC and within those 14 key controls that you mentioned, the cataloging is key. If you're going to control your data in the cloud, you need to know that it exists. You need to have found it, and you need to have captured information about it. And classification is another key piece of information to have so that you can apply the right controls to the right data. And you'll find those as 2 of the key foundation controls in those 14 controls that we've recently published in CDMC.
Anand, obviously you're our man there in APJ, but you and I have spoke many times there. How is Informatica helping our customers address these conversations and requirements in your region?
Absolutely, Peter. And it's a very topical conversation because, I mean, what Colin mentioned, data management challenges don't go away just because you move to cloud, right? And we had seen the same transition. We've been having the databases in the past, and data management was critical at that time. Then we had a wave of big data coming in. There was, again, the need for data management was very clear. Cloud is no different. It's just because we've had a new approach to, obviously, those efficient. I mean, the benefits that you've mentioned are all key from a cloud perspective, but data management challenges don't go away. I'll cite an example. I mean, as recent as last week, I was speaking to a customer and they were telling me they went on a cloud journey. They implemented their data warehouse and moved their data warehouse onto the cloud, thinking that they can streamline the access to data and get the consumers to consume the data from central location. But what they found was those users were still having those siloed view of data. They're taking their own copy and creating them. And in the process, they're creating the same old problem of inconsistent results coming out and different people reporting different metrics out to the executive, right? The same challenge came about. So that again addresses a key aspect of what Colin mentioned and what Craig mentioned as well. A need for a catalog, a need for governance, and that visibility into it and understanding who owns it and driving that value and providing the centralized view so that they can consume it, knowing that they can trust that data. And those are the key conversations we are having. And one other thing that I've seen, and I was talking to someone else earlier, was when cloud came in, as you mentioned, the efficiencies are about the savings, cost savings, and other aspects, right? So the primary goal was to lift and shift. So data was lifted and shifted from on-premise to the cloud, thinking that things will go away. And they were, as recent as another customer was saying, they were just replicating into the Snowflake, they replicated into S3 buckets all over the place. But the garbage is right there. What we are seeing now, though, is that shift in people have understood the challenges around it. They need to upfront before they move to the cloud, they want to understand what data do they have on premise, what is appropriate to take it onto the cloud. Hence, the need for catalog and need for governance capability is paramount. That's a core capability, and in addition to the overall data management.
Here, interesting in the States, what I've seen in the 14 years that I've been here at Informatica, number one, there is a mindset change. One is they're actually thinking about the data management and governance requirements before they go off and buy the next new cloud shiny thing and then deal with it after the fact. That's one. Number two is then modernizing their data management and governance capabilities, the tooling that they may have purchased 10, 20 years ago, because it is really the opportunity to not just modernize your business applications and analytics, but also the supporting solutions that help you manage and govern data. Second question, we've heard a lot about local data privacy and residency laws impacting cloud strategies and investments of multinational organizations. What are you all seeing out there in your region, and how are organizations dealing with that? Colin.
Yeah, so if you accept that it's easier to do things in the cloud, it's easier to move data, it's easier to access data, it's easier to combine data, you have to sort of accept the other side of that coin as well, which is then it's also easier to get into trouble. There's a greater risk if you don't know your data, if you don't know what data you have, and if you don't know where that data is residing. So what we're seeing again is the need for those controls. That you've got these greater risks. Again, if in an on-premises world, you maybe have fewer possible locations for the data. You can have stricter controls around those fewer locations. You need to have something much more general that works, ideally probably off metadata about the rules for privacy, the rules for sovereignty, and metadata about the data that you're trying to protect. And again, there should be automation opportunity there that you can enforce the controls automatically driven from the metadata.
Craig, I'm sure you guys are dealing with this, given the cloud architecture globally that you guys invest in. How's Microsoft handling these requirements?
I think this is number one on our agenda. Recently we announced the support of the EU data boundary, ensuring all of our data and processes for any of our customers that need to process GDPR data and remains within that zone, the investments that we're making in local data centers, and some specific for government and military purposes as well. So we really understand, just from a pure storage perspective, from a pure sort of security perspective, where we need to place that data and to ensure that we're compliant with, EU, local government, various laws and requirements. And then passing that on to our customers and helping them also ensure that they meet those same standards, which in an on-prem world can be expensive, it can be timely, and they may not even know, where for us, it could be quite simply ticking a box and saying, hey, I reside in the EU, please make sure everything is looking good from a storage perspective.
Does that apply to metadata as well, Craig? So if I needed to have end-to-end visibility across multiple countries where my data might exist, do the laws prevent looking at it from a metadata perspective?
Look, we started to build out a lot of our automated tooling, right? Just to be able to scan and search and discover. I'll be honest, it's nothing in comparison to what a tool like Informatica provides, but it can provide the bare minimum. And I think pairing a tool like that with the comfort of saying, just from a pure infrastructure perspective, make sure I'm compliant. And from a Microsoft perspective, when you tick that box, that's everything. That's metadata, that's your Office 365 data, that's your emails, everything goes into that boundary. But that kind of next level as to how do I ensure I'm compliant on behalf of my customers and my users, we recommend a hybrid approach, I guess, with tools like Informatica to ensure that it's discoverable and secure.
So Anand, little ad hoc and build on top of what Craig said there. What are we hearing, and how is Informatica addressing the data lineage and transparency challenges in this multi-cloud, multinational, multi-data center environment?
Look, I mean, because the independence, or rather, we work with all ecosystems and all cloud organizations, right? I mean, SaaS offerings that you might have. Our goal is to ensure that we're able to bring the silos together and make it more centralized. With that approach, when you look at it, Lineage, wherever we can, I mean, we're not saying that we can do it 100%. If anyone says that they can cover 100% of the Lineage, I mean, that's a challenge right now, especially with the technology that is evolving. But obviously covering the critical aspects of it. And we are continually growing with advanced scanners, scripts, especially with Python, PySpark coming in, and all those other aspects. And we are investing into that as well. So we have a lot of customers using those script level Lineage build and whatnot. So to answer your question, Lineage is something that is core to our capability, core to our requirement of our customers. And we are building and evolving that space and helping our customers throughout that journey. That is one. The second aspect is obviously when it comes to, you mentioned about metadata, right? We've had few customers, especially in the financial services, government, or utility space, they would want both metadata and data to be locally residing, that data residency requirements. But when it comes to some of the other customers, we've had customers using the US infrastructure for metadata, but we don't hold the data in many ways because of a metadata solution. They still can hold the data locally, wherever it might be. So we allow the customers a flexibility of that sort to make sure that they embark on their cloud journey without too much of an issue. Third one is obviously data protection. You covered that, right? That's a key requirement when it comes to obviously putting these sensitive and personal data onto a cloud infrastructure. So one of the ways we help customers is obviously, first of all, you need to understand, as Colin mentioned, ability to know where the data is residing, especially in this space, as in you got SaaS applications, you got cloud infrastructure, and you got on-premise. Knowing where the sensitive and personal data is first is critical, that intelligence, before looking at what strategy you want to adopt to protect and reduce that risk and minimize the risk. Those are the things that I'm seeing.
You know, it's interesting. there was a conversation, I think, when we were planning for this panel. Question came up. There's a lot of new fintechs out there these days. Obviously, in the Asia Pacific region, literally, there's probably a new fintech born every hour. Here in the States as well, it's just proliferant. People ask, well, if you're cloud native and you're one of these high flying startups out there, it must be a lot easier because many of these organizations are cloud native and they're born in the cloud. They're doing a lot on Azure and they're not dealing with the 30, 40-year-old mainframe system to crunch away those transactions. Does being cloud native and of the current generation make it harder or easier to govern and manage data in the cloud? Colin.
So it's another one of there's two sides to the coin, I think. Cloud native, there's a risk using the words cloud native that you're coming at it with a technology mindset and you're just thinking about the technology and leveraging the technology. If you don't think about the data management needs when you're planning your cloud migration, you'll end up not catering for those needs. The positive side of the coin is that the cloud native hopefully gives you a greenfield opportunity to build in your data management controls. Again, that's what the CDMC controls are all about. If you have these things built in and you have the automation that the cloud promises, then you should get to a better place. So there's a risk that you don't, but there's a great opportunity that you do.
Yeah. Craig, any comments on that front?
I think I agree. I think it depends, right? You can either make your life a lot easier, a lot harder. And to me, a lot of it actually is about integration and interoperability, right? You can pick the latest and greatest amazing SaaS product / tool. If it doesn't support your data management tool, if it doesn't support your visualization tool, you're really in for a world of hurt, right? And so I think there's sort of two trends I see happening. There are vendors such as Microsoft and Azure who are really kind of building a completely tightly integrated experience, right? From the SQL Server all the way through to the Power BI visualization. But that sort of approach can rob you of innovation. So we're seeing these tools come in that have fantastic pedigrees and also are focusing on, hey, if you want to work Snowflake with Azure with this, and I've got this over here on-prem, they're the get out of jail free cards, right? So I think just really thinking about not just the tools that you select in isolation, but how they work with your whole ecosystem is vital to ensuring that you make your life a lot easier.
All right, so I'm looking at the Q&A board here and see if there's any questions that have come up. Let me see if we can get to a couple of them. There it says here. So it's from Anupam, managing data in complex environments, either whether your data resides in public, private, or hybrid cloud, managing it can become a burden for your IT department. How does existing framework help reduce the effort needed to build error-proof, streamlined data processing pipelines? Anand, you want to take that one?
So that was a long question. So what was the?
Yeah. So how does the existing framework help reduce the efforts needed to build error-proof, streamlined data processing pipelines?
Error-proof, streamlined data processing pipeline. So, with regards to data management, obviously things don't change much in terms of what you do with just because you move to the cloud. It's another source or another target from our perspective. As long as you have the ability to connect to these systems, you should be in a position to manage that effectively. The whole capabilities of data management when it comes to, it's about the integration, it's about the quality, it's about protection. All of those are part of the modern data management platform that Informatica offers.
So Craig, question for you came out here from, is it Raghavendra? One of the problems they're facing is the quality of metadata, mainly due to manual human tasks prone to errors in DevOps, in the DevOps model. In your experience, has there been any AI project that looks at metadata to classify and autocorrect the key elements?
So really interesting question. There are a number of technologies that we have, say, for example, with SQL Server, with data discovery and classification, right? And it's going to go through and search and help identify data that's pertained across your systems. Autocorrect is the tricky one because this can either have a really unintended consequences. AI is never perfect, and are we sure we want to start sort of altering metadata just based on an AI model without any governance and control over that? What's actually quite interesting is when we look at the end-to-end process, right, and you talk about manual human tasks, for me, it actually starts to bring in a variety of components from our organization, right? Robotic process automation, say, other kind of workflow tools, other checks throughout the process as opposed to at the end. So I think, yes, there are tools that allow you to classify, and I'll respond with some of those. But I think as well, looking at the entire tool chain and areas where you can remove those manual human tasks, RPA is a great starting point, and we're seeing a huge acceleration of adoption of RPA because of exactly this.
Great. So thank you, Colin, Anand, and Craig. It looks like time goes by really quick when you're having fun here. So I appreciate the participation this afternoon, evening. It's late for me, so I'm calling it evening, and it's very late for John. So with that said, thank you, gentlemen. And for the folks that we weren't able to get to your questions, we'll make sure we respond offline. John and Mike, I think there's one more slide there. Yeah, so again, one of the things, just to recap here, when you look at technology solutions to manage and govern data, what you try to do is look at who are the leaders in the market that you can trust and then you can learn from, but more importantly, where you can invest and really partner with organizations. And Informatica is very proud to be the leader in the 5 magic quadrants, from integration as a platform all the way through our latest and greatest enterprise data cataloging solutions for metadata management. For more information, please visit us at informatica.com, and I'm sure that you'll be hearing from our colleagues who are working with our team in APJ, along with the EDM Council, as we'll be doing more with Microsoft on many of these topics with the council to come. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the evening here at your event.
Thank you, Peter.